How's it going, everyone? I'm Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and if you're watching this video, you're likely wanting to know the differences between the Crew, the Quest for Planet 9, and the Crew Mission Deep Sea, which just recently released. Well, honestly, the biggest difference is how much time has passed and how much I look different, because I'm wearing the exact same clothes as when I did the How to Play video for the Crew. So I'm putting up the screenshot right now. You can see the comparison. This is what a year and a half in a pandemic will do to someone between versions of the Crew, apparently. But honestly, there's a few differences between these versions, but honestly there's a lot that's the same. If you're coming from the Crew, the Quest for Planet 9, you love that game, you're not really going to have to learn any new rules to get into Mission Deep Sea, but there are some changes that make this version really, really exciting. So the way I'm going to do this video, I was trying to think of the best way to sort of review my experience with Mission Deep Sea, but also compare the versions. What I've decided is I'm going to answer 5 questions that I think are sort of the burning questions someone might have who has either played the Crew and wants to know if they should get Mission Deep Sea or is wondering where to start. I'm going to answer all these 5 questions. That should hopefully answer most of the questions you will have about, which version to jump into or how you're comparing these. If I didn't answer something that you specifically want to know, don't worry. Ask me in the comments and I will gladly answer that question. Obviously, there's some stuff I might not cover, but I'm going to do my absolute best. And so with that, the first question that we're going to answer is, what are the differences between these versions? I feel like that is the #1 question people are going to have. So let's start with the rules. The rules are the exact same. There's no differences in terms of how you play. So if you know how to play the Crew, when you buy Mission Deep Sea, you don't have to really learn anything else in terms of the core gameplay rules. The biggest difference, we're going to start there, is in the way that the task cards are handled. So in the Crew, you'll remember that there was the task cards that were sort of shuffled up and given, and depending which task card you had, they were basically replicas of the cards that were in the main deck. So if you got the pink 3, you might have to, be the first one to win a trick to gain that pink 3. There was different qualifications on what the task was based on the mission you were doing, but also based on the numbered tiles that were out. I don't want to say it was inelegant, but that's probably the best way to word it. The tasks should be super simple, but sometimes they would get a little confusing with the numbers that were out there and knowing what does the arrow mean in comparison to the numbers. I know that's where I got most of the questions when I was teaching the Crew and trying to explain it to people. You get it after a couple of play sessions, but it was sort of the one hiccup or one place people will get hung up on. The Crew Mission Deep Sea is completely different in terms of the task cards. All the task cards are now are all like unique and all much more, not complicated, but more complex, but in a way that doesn't make it harder to get into. So rather than it just be, you have the task for the pink 3, it'll be something much more specific, saying you have to win the pink 3 as the first trick of the game, and the task card itself will actually say that on it, or it'll say you have to win a 9 of any color using a 1 or something. They're very, I'm throwing out random tests. I don't even know if these are all tasks in there, but it's a lot more specific, and it makes the games more difficult at times and more complex, but much, much more interesting. I find that the tasks in Mission Deep Sea, it's almost no comparison. I have much more fun with the tasks in this version than I did the original, and I love the original. Not to say that the tasks were boring in the original. The gameplay was sound, it was awesome, but I just feel like, especially having experienced this game a whole bunch and now moving to Mission Deep Sea, my one concern was, am I going to play this version and say, yeah, it's great, but I was getting that same experience when I played the Crew with the Quest for Planet 9. Like, what is the difference? Like, why am I owning both these versions? And the tasks are one of the biggest arguments to have Mission Deep Sea. Much more complex, much more interesting, makes for harder games, and just makes for a more fun experience. I think when you win, it feels sometimes more accomplished because the tasks have even that more. In the original, you'd have that sense of, oh my god, how are we going to figure out how to win this round? I don't know if we can get all these tasks. You have that way more often in Mission Deep Sea, and it feels way more difficult to overcome, so you feel more accomplished when you actually pull it off. So another difference you should be aware of is that there are less missions in Mission Deep Sea. So I mean, obviously this one takes place in space, this one takes place under the sea.
Under the sea, under the sea.
So in the original, the Crew for Quest for Planet 9, you got 50 missions. In Mission Deep Sea, you do get 32, so there's 18 less missions. But one thing to keep in mind is that the Crew had this thing where it was sort of the first 25 missions were a little bit of, I would say, like not an introduction. It's not like it was a tutorial, but it was introducing you to the concepts, and it was, distinctively easier, I would say, than the second half, the second 25. So when you look at it that way, the second 25 is really the meat of the Crew, the Quest for Planet 9. So you had 25 there. You get 32, and I found that even though the first couple are very much tutorial, I would say that by the 5th mission, we were already failing, and we were already having to like repeat missions because of the tasks we were getting and because of how much more difficult it can be. It was just a lot more of an interesting experience that way. So even though there's less missions, I feel like you're not going to really notice it all that much, unless you were someone who just really, really like constantly went through all 50 missions and felt really challenged by all 50. But I feel like it was more that last 25 where a lot of people spent their time. So the other thing I do want to go back to, I'm realizing, on the task cards, there is also a difference now in terms of how they're distributed. So in the original, it would just say, there are 3 tasks in this mission. In this version, it scales per player count, and on the back of each task card, I'll put some imagery on the screen so you can check it out. There's basically numbers for each player count, and then number is sort of the power level that is going to be for the scenario you're doing. So every scenario is going to have a power level associated with it, and every task card is going to have a power level of that task card based on its difficulty. So if you have a power level of 5, you're going to draw cards off the top of the deck blindly, just looking at the backs, until you've drawn until the cards you've drawn are equal to power level of 5. So say you've drawn a 2, and then all of a sudden you draw another 2. You're not going to play that 2. You're going to keep drawing until you find a 1, and that's going to equal your power level of 5. And then those are the cards you're going to use, which is an interesting system. It keeps the balance in check. It can make sure that you do have some difficult cards. The only thing I'll say is it's a little bit inelegant again in terms of like, you could draw a power level 2, and then you're just drawing off the top constantly. Sometimes you're going through like 20 cards looking for a power level 1. At that point, you're kind of just searching the deck looking for the one you want. It doesn't feel super slick, but at the same time, what's the alternative? And it doesn't really affect the gameplay. So it never bothered me. Just something to keep in mind that you're going to have to be doing. Those are honestly the main differences. Obviously, the theme's different. The cards have different artwork, but they're still, function the same way. Instead of rockets, this one's, I think, submarines, if I'm not mistaken. So like everything's still there. The theme has just changed, but those are honestly the main differences. The biggest one to just be aware of are the task cards. I feel like that is the biggest change and the one that's going to influence people's decisions on which one to buy and which one they enjoy more the most out of anything else. So that is the answer to the first question. Let's jump into question number 2. And the second question is probably another big one that's on everyone's mind. Do you need to own both versions? It's a tough question to answer for any comparison of games because everyone's going to be different. I can give you an answer right now, and I'm going to, but it's not going to apply for everyone. So don't take this as law that Dylan from All You Can Board said I should own both or I shouldn't own both. Obviously, it's going to apply to different people. I'm going to try to explain that in the subsequent questions, try to give you a little more clarity. But just from my opinion, having played both, I think that you can absolutely own both, and you can get a lot of mileage out of both and enjoy both. But I feel like, in my opinion, very soon, Mission Deep Sea is going to phase out the Quest for Planet 9 for me. And that's because I am so much more interested in what's going on in Mission Deep Sea with the task cards and how much more interesting I'm finding the games because of it, that I feel like it's going to get to the point where going back to the Crew, Quest for Planet 9, is going to feel like a step back for me personally. Now, that's just if I'm thinking about it from my perspective and me enjoying these games. The other thing to factor in is who are you introducing games to and who are you playing with? Because I've heard a lot of people say that they've had tons of success introducing the Crew to people who don't play games at all. Family members or in-laws and things like that don't normally play games, and they're being able to introduce the Crew to them, and they're enjoying it. There's a bit of a hurdle with some of the rules. I understand trick-taking games and things of that nature, but generally it's a really successful place to go. I feel like that's going to still be the case. It's going to be way more successful to introduce this version than this version to that specific crowd. People who don't normally play games or are very, general board game players, card game players. This is going to be an easier place to start because of the less complexity you're finding with the task cards. I feel like some of the task cards in here, it's not going to be that the tasks are too hard to wrap your head around. It's going to be that the strategy of how to accomplish them all is going to be harder as an introductory place than the Crew is, where it's just win this specific trick, for instance. So I think if you're someone who is going to be introduced, or has people in your life or people that you're expecting to introduce games to that don't play very often, or already are really enamored with the Crew and you still don't play very often, you only play infrequently, this is probably one you're going to want to keep in your collection for those situations, but then you're going to want to have this one in your collection for you specifically and your friends who are more into games and to explore that complexity and the more interesting design. And because these are not expensive games, it's not also unreasonable to say you can own both. It's not like these are $200 games and I'm saying own both. We're talking like $15 to $20 games. It's a easier barrier to entry to be able to have both in your collection. So I really think it depends who you're playing with and who you're introducing games to. Me personally, and I played Mission Deep Sea with, I had obviously played the original crew. I played with someone else who had played the crew a lot. And I also played with someone in that same session that had never played the crew at all. And I had no issue whatsoever introducing this to them. It was just like the crew. It took a couple sessions to understand the strategy of how we're all working cooperatively in this trick-taking environment. But there were no other issues with that. So me personally, I'm pretty confident Mission Deep Sea is going to phase out the original crew for me. But again, for you, it's going to depend on who you're introducing the crew to and who you're playing with more often. All right, the next question we're going to talk about, these next two are kind of, sister questions, we'll call them. And they're going to be pretty quick. I kind of already covered some of this stuff, but I just want to stress some of it. So the first one's going to be, who is the crew the Quest for Planet 9 for? And then we're going to talk about who the crew Mission Deep Sea is for. So the crew Quest for Planet 9, honestly, this is where I think this one is going to beat out Mission Deep Sea in the sense that the crew with Quest for Planet 9, in my experience, is pretty much for everyone. People who are brand new to board games, card games, tabletop games have absolutely loved the crew when I've introduced it. They've just been blown away by what a game of this size that's cooperative can do. I've had people that normally don't like cooperative games love the puzzle element of the crew Quest for Planet 9. A lot of cooperative games, you're playing against the game, like Pandemic, you're playing against the game itself. And you could make an argument saying that's kind of what you're doing here, but it's not. Like, you're all working together with these cards to solve a puzzle that you have because of these task cards. So it feels different. It feels like you're just working on a puzzle together. And I feel like that cooperative experience is unique for a lot of people. They don't expect that coming in. So it's been really successful with those people. But at the same time, all my friends who are, big into card games and board games, play all the time and have, tons of games in their collection, love the crew. And anytime we sit down and play it, it's never a dull experience. Even we've played some of the same missions multiple times and come back to it and loved it. So I feel like the crew has that over a lot of games, but especially over even Mission Deep Sea, and that it's kind of for everyone. You can have this game in your collection. You can feel confident introducing it to people. You can feel confident that you're going to have a good time whenever you pull it out. If you are playing with more advanced people, you don't have to start on the first mission. You can say, let's start on mission 30 where things are more complicated. So that's sort of why I would say the crew is for a little bit of everybody. Whereas let's talk about who the crew Mission Deep Sea is for. And in that case, I would say it's still going to work really well with lots of groups, just like the crew does. But I think if you're, like I said, if you're often introducing games to new gamers or people that don't play games very often, the crew Mission Deep Sea is probably not for you or for those people specifically. I think this is for people who, one, have experienced the crew and I just want a whole lot more of it and want, advancements and more interesting decisions and seeing what the systems of this original game can do when they're stretched to their limits. So I think that's specifically who the Mission Deep Sea is for. And I think it's also just for if you haven't played the crew, but you consider yourself a more experienced gamer, or you've played a lot of trick-taking games. Maybe you've already played the Fox and the Forest duet, so you have sort of a know-how of cooperative trick-taking games as well. I think this could be a place to start, and you don't even have to necessarily start with the crew unless you really want, to have 82 missions instead of 32 because you're that into it. I think that's specifically who Mission Deep Sea is for, as well as the more experienced gamers or the ones who are looking for a little bit more of a challenge is probably the best way to say it. And then the last question I'm going to answer is the big one. Which version is better? And I'm going to also kind of tie in here, what is my full final thoughts, my quick little review of Mission Deep Sea. So which version is better? In my opinion, I'm not even going to beat around the bush. I think Mission Deep Sea is the better game. I think this is a better experience of the crew. I prefer it I prefer it to Quest for Planet 9, and that's saying a lot because the crew was one of my favorite games of 2020. I had it on my list. It's still one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely love this game. So know that I don't say it lightly that Mission Deep Sea is in my opinion, the better game. And that's honestly just because it's basically just improved on everything I wanted it the systems to be improved on from the original. It has the exact same gameplay that I love. It has the same puzzle elements with with your friends around the table trying to figure out how you're possibly going to overcome everything. And the one thing I wanted, which was more interesting tasks and a more and higher difficulty, it delivered on. So for me specifically, the type of gamer I am, I'll always gravitate towards Mission Deep Sea unless someone specifically wants to start with this version, or it's someone that I feel like this is going to be a better beginning point. But otherwise, if I find that I'm just constantly going to this version, the original is one that's going to leave my collection just because I don't need it anymore. This is the superior game in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion on it. It's based on my level of how much I play board games, who I'm introducing games to. There's tons of merit on both, and to actually revisit both. It's just for my personal collection, I think Mission Deep Sea is the one that's going to stick around. So overall thoughts, I think that there's a lot of board games that do very well, and then right away there's a lot of sequels coming out or follow-ups because they're trying to cash in on the success of the game. Look at Azul, right? Azul is such a popular game. We keep getting new versions of Azul. In that case, every time we get a new version of Azul, it's pretty much a brand new experience. But it maintains that one aspect of how you pick your tiles, and then how you're placing them is completely changing every single time. I feel like the Mission Deep Sea sticks a lot closer to the formula here. It's basically the same game with a new theme, new missions, and new task cards. And those are the things you'd expect to change. And I would say that the theme and the story and all that it's just a minor change. I mean, that's never the reason you're coming to the crew, is because it's this hugely deep story. But the task change is exactly what they needed to do, and sort of exactly where the evolution needed to go. That I feel like it's the perfect sequel in that sense. That it's just taking everything we love and giving you more of it in a better way. And I'm curious how else you evolve the formula. Like when we get the crew desert mission or whatever the next one's going to be, what's the evolution there? Are they just going to come up with even more complex task cards? So I feel like we're going to reach a ceiling of complexity, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a barrier on those versions of now they're too hard for beginners. So what else can you evolve the crew formula with? Maybe there's a better 2-player version you can introduce, because it's sort of a 2-player variant that's included in the box. That it's a better game from 3 to 5 in my opinion. What can you evolve on to keep this series going, if that's something you want to do? That's a big question. I'm kind of wondering and pondering, is like, where does this end, or how many versions we're going to get? But as it stands right now, I think it's a phenomenal sequel, phenomenal game. I love Mission Deep Sea and what they did with the task cards. I've stressed it so much, you probably are tired of hearing me talk about task cards. But yeah, those are all my thoughts on the differences between these games. I should have mentioned it at the beginning. I'll probably include it at the beginning as well, but if you click up above, there's the how to play version for the crew, the Quest for Planet 9. If you watch that video, you'll know exactly how to play Mission Deep Sea. The only thing you'll have to wrap your head around are the new task cards. So feel free to watch that video if you want to learn how to play. You can play both these versions of Board Game Arena. You don't even have to own the physical copies if you want to check it out. Otherwise, I hope this video helped you out. If you have any other questions about these versions and the differences, ask me in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.